So, we're going to begin today with this conversation. I want to thank Jake Wood and Alex Karp. I want to thank José María Figueres, former president of Costa Rica, leader of the Carbon War Room. They're all going to be brought on, but this is really exciting. My daughter had the idea that we should, as a foundation, do something in the aftermath of Sandy. And we decided to go to the Rockaways, and I said, how many people can you raise? She said, 1,000. I said, you sure? She said, yeah, I'll just send an email out. 1,000 people show up. Between our employees and our supporters in the area. 8 hours, 1,050 signed up, 1,020 showed up. What you're about to hear, I will give you personal testimony. It is very difficult for 1,000 people to show up and say, I want to help, and all be kept busy in a constructive way for 8 hours. Think you could do it? It's busy. How many times have you showed up to volunteer for something and half the time you spent standing around? This is the story of how it worked, and it's a good way to begin. Thank you very much.
Palantir Technologies is a software company based in Palo Alto. We've come to help out with Hurricane Sandy, this organization called Team Rubicon, which is a group of veterans that provides disaster relief.
Team Rubicon called us and said, hey, come up and help us try to figure out this problem. There's all these people that need help, and there's all these people who want to help, and we have no way to kind of connect the dots.
When we first got here, Team Rubicon was recording their data on paper. The first thing we did is we ate all that information. Then we set up a system where residents are just walking up, there's a volunteer standing there with an iPad, putting their information into a web form that automatically creates an object in Palantir that is a request for help object.
We're actually going to be looking for more of this while we're up here.
The other primary ways, we've got people with Palantir mobile devices, and they go out, they take photos of the damage itself, and they send that image and that data, and it creates an object in Palantir out of that.
You can see some of the data that's getting collected.
It's one thing to look at a spreadsheet of data and know that you have 300 jobs outstanding out of 800. It's another thing entirely to know where those are.
We're trying to make it so that when volunteers walk up to help Team Rubicon knows exactly how to make most efficient use of those volunteers.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I can't thank you guys enough. I can't thank you guys enough.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome José María Figueres, former president of the Republic of Costa Rica and president of the Carbon War Room, and Alex Karp, chief executive officer, Palantir Technologies, and Jake Wood, co-founder and president, Team Rubicon.
Well, that was an extraordinary video, but I can tell you that the story behind the video and the leaders that make it possible is even more extraordinary, as we are going to share with you in a couple of minutes. Friends, as you've heard, I come from Costa Rica, and in my work, I have had the opportunity of traveling many places of the world. And I'm sure that I can speak for many millions around the world that recognize in President Clinton the leadership and the statesmanship that the world of today and of the future needs. The leadership and the statesmanship that, especially in these days of such acrimonious political settings in many than more one country around the world, is so much needed. Many of us around here have come to CGI more than once, and we've heard, participated, and seen the wonderful things that happen in the context of CGI. On a personal level, I like to think of CGI as a place where you come in once a year or twice, if you make the winter meeting as well, and you recharge your batteries to go back out there and do battle for a better world. And that's what CGI is all about. I have the privilege this afternoon of being the moderator in a conversation between Jake Wood, the co-founder and the president of Team Rubicon, a tremendous organization, and Alex Karp, the CEO of a wonderful technology company called Palantir Technologies. So let me start off this conversation with a couple of reflections that would set the stage. When we raise our sights to see what's coming up over the horizon, in terms of the challenges that we need to undertake together as humanity, there are two that bear a tremendous amount of importance. One is the challenge and the fight against inequality and poverty. And we have today the technology and the wherewithal in economic terms to win that fight. And the second challenge is the one that President Clinton has mentioned, the challenge of climate change. Fortunately for all of us, we can win those two challenges with the same set of instruments and with the same objective of migrating to a low-carbon economy. That would create the opportunities for new job creation, entrepreneurs, investment in new business models that would also create decent, dignified livelihoods for millions of people around the world. And that brings us around then to the importance of building resilience and of specifically building this capacity with respect to the natural disasters we're going to be facing a lot more of in the future, such as the one we just had here in New York with Hurricane Sandy, which the President mentioned. One way of doing that, of course, is mobilizing for impact, which is the theme of this year's CGI, and it allows organizations with different skill sets, different missions, to come together, aggregate their resources in an organized way, and deliver in a focused fashion so that they can achieve what they want to do. And that brings us around to our two discussion leaders of this afternoon that have come together in the aftermath of Sandy to significantly increase their impact. So let me start the conversation with Jake and Alex. Let me ask each one of you, and perhaps we'll start with you, Alex, and then go to Jake, to give us a minute bio, 30-second bio of yourself, and then unpack your organization in about 2 minutes.
Well, thank you for having us, and it's a deep honor to be here. I have a PhD in philosophy from the University of Frankfurt. Despite that, I started a business, and it actually worked. The business idea was to take a methodology used at PayPal to stop cyber fraud and turn it into a data integration platform, which sounds really boring, but is crucial to basically all special operator intelligence work done in the world, in America and abroad. And we were also very focused on kind of what we call PCL, civil liberties. So how do you get the data to work for the end user in a very narrow timeline under harsh conditions while simultaneously protecting civil liberties? And we basically built the business by going around from mission impact to mission impact, and trying to gravitate to where there was real problems to solve, either protecting data or data protection of civil liberties, or stopping terror attacks, or helping banks understand data exfiltration, cyber, and then building teams around them. We rely on people like Team Rubicon, who are deep experts, and thought leaders like the president. Though this has been a very special experience and a rare and treasured experience. I also like to say, the first time that the president called, I was so honored. I thought it was a blogger trying to trick me into talking about something I'm not supposed to talk about. But our basic mission is to serve people like you and like Team Rubicon in doing your crucial needs by solving some very, very technical challenges that we typically call big data.
Alex, how many jobs have you created, direct jobs, and in what period of time?
We have 900 people that work at Palantir. We started in 2004 with 5 of us. There are probably another 1,000 that work indirectly for us.
Great going. Jake, tell us about yourself and your organization.
Well, very briefly, I enlisted in the United States Marine Corps after graduating college in 2005, and obviously at an inflection point in both wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I had the distinct pleasure of serving our country in uniform as a scout sniper in the Marines, once in Iraq with the surge, and again in 2008 in Afghanistan. I came back, and Team Rubicon was kind of born out of necessity with the Haiti earthquake in 2010. My co-founder and I, William McNulty, realized that there was a huge burgeoning problem in Port-au-Prince immediately after the earthquake, and that was we could get plenty of supplies to Port-au-Prince, but getting supplies to the Haitian people was a challenge. And looking at what was happening on the screen, I knew that the training and the experiences that I had had and that William had in the Marine Corps would offer us a unique opportunity to apply those same skills, those small unit leadership, the risk mitigation, the operational planning skills that we had learned in the military, and apply them into a post-disaster scenario. So that was our first mission, was the 2010 earthquake in Haiti. And since then, Team Rubicon as an organization has grown with the mission of bringing veterans home from Iraq and Afghanistan and providing them with a new mission, a new community, and a new sense of self through disaster relief. Through this, we're actually foolish enough to think that we can improve disaster relief, and I think that we took a step towards that in Hurricane Sandy by partnering with Palantir and leveraging technology as a force multiplier in a post-disaster scenario.
So, from your description, well deserved. From your description, both organizations could not be more different in their remit and in their nature. And yet, in the aftermath of Sandy, you were kind of baptized in fire and had to work together in very short term. So Alex, using your core competencies in Palantir, how did you convince Jake and his organization to adopt the technologies that you were able to provide them with and empower them to do a lot more?
Well, we are different in that we have very different skill sets, and most of the people that work on Team Rubicon can do all sorts of things, including tying their shoes that we can't do very well. But we do share kind of a commitment to output and making the world a better place, and judge our work based on output. The difference is that we're totally non-competitive because we know we're not going to be special operators. We don't have a competence to work in disaster relief environments or in disaster environments at all. We can allow you and the expertise you bring to the table to be organized in a way where it's a lot more effective, where you can target what you're doing, where you can organize literally volunteers with a ratio of over 250 to 1. But we're not the people who have the knowledge of how to do it on the ground. And so the kind of narrow nexus of values commitment and wide girth of difference is where we, I think, come together, and we did it on the ground.
Yeah, it was interesting to actually see it take place on the ground. The head of Palantir's philanthropy team called me immediately after the hurricane, and he said, "Jake, how can we help?" And at that time, we still had not fully explored this relationship, and I didn't, admittedly, as a dumb Marine, I didn't quite fully understand the grasp. I couldn't understand the scope of what Palantir could do, and Brian Fishman kept calling me, asking what they could do, and he finally bothered me so much that I said, "Just fly to JFK and we'll figure it out." And really, that's what he did. Palantir sent a team of 5 in, and I think 2 things really made it possible. I think one was the ability to take head-on a seemingly impossible task. The idea of charging straight into New York post-Sandy and saying, we're going to make a difference, and this is 24 hours after that hurricane made landfall, is something that a lot of organizations aren't willing to take on. It's a huge risk, and there's, of course, the possibility of failing. And the second thing was humility between both organizations. Palantir came in. They didn't try to run the show. They simply said, let us show you what we can do. And on our end, it was saying, we don't have this capability. We know our limitations. We're writing our information down on paper. We know we can do better. And both of us coming humbly to the table and saying, here's how we can each play our strengths up to make the sum greater than its parts, I think is really what led to the success.
And I think, since then, we've been active in Georgia, and the efficiency and the knowledge has gone way up, and we've improved certain parts of our product based on what we've done. one of the things we saw in theater where our product is used, and what we're seeing in philanthropy, is that one of the big challenges is capturing the knowledge you learn in one environment and taking it to another environment. So when there's a disaster, you don't want to start at ground zero. And one of the interesting things about Team Rubicon is it's basically the same model that kind of fractional ownership is. They have 8,000 volunteers. Not all of them are available at one time. About 800 are available at any time. So when you deploy them, some of the people have been on deployments, but some have never been. You can't start from what you didn't know before one hurricane. You have to start at kind of the apex of knowledge. And so one of the things we can do together is capture that knowledge in the product. And we've already seen this in your work in Georgia, you might want to talk about, but it's like there's just been a real increase in our output.
Yeah, I think, to that point, we recently responded to the tornadoes in northern Georgia, and which is what Alex is referencing there, and he's right. The opportunity that Sandy presented was it forced us to collaborate. It forced us to figure out the decisions and the way forward, because the opportunity cost was too high not to act. But in order to continue that relationship, continue to mobilize and do it more effectively each time, it's capturing that institutional knowledge and making sure that the next time we don't start from ground zero, that we start and we hit the ground running. And I think that what we saw in Georgia is that the efficiencies went through the roof. From Sandy to Adairsville, Georgia, the efficiencies, I'd say, doubled between those two.
So talking to those efficiencies, if I may ask the both of you, one of the challenges in situations like after Sandy, after each crisis, is, of course, how do you organize hundreds or thousands of people that want to volunteer to do something, and there's no capacity built in, any infrastructure there that allows to organize the people that want to help out? How did you go about that? How did you leverage each other's skills in terms of being able to organize many volunteers to help you?
Well, I think the thing that we see in any post-disaster scenario is there's no shortage of goodwill. We all know that the government is going to come in and solve a post-disaster scenario. The city, federal, state, that's not what it's going to be. It's not going to be the National Guard. It's going to be the community. It's going to be your neighbors. Those are the first responders in a post-disaster scenario, and they continue to be the first responders for the next 2 weeks. Church groups, organizations like CGI bringing 1,000 volunteers out like they did on November 18th. But these people, they don't know what they're doing, and they want to be led. So how do you lead them? Well, we're taking former corporals and sergeants from the military, people that have led people, groups of 12 to 35 in combat situations, the worst situations imaginable, and we're going to take those and we're going to take that leadership that's been honed in those situations, and we're going to apply it in post-disaster. But to do that effectively, you need intelligence. Intelligence drives operations, and that's where Palantir came in.
Just to one kind of orthogonal thought. The interesting thing about these environments, like in other environments, is you simultaneously have to organize the data, but also even in a disaster relief situation, there's also data you can't share and don't want to share. And the more that it moves into a stage of working with volunteers, but also with government organizations or people with various data sets you can get, you have the problem of how do you organize. In this case, it was 14,000 volunteers. In the Georgia case, it's staggering. It's 2,500 volunteers and 10 people, 15 people they put on the ground. But you also then we can't have a situation where civil liberties basically are eviscerated. So doing that simultaneously is very, very difficult and requires very trained, skilled labor that's actually not motivated by money, but motivated by the desire to serve post-military, and then a platform. The only last thought I would say on this is there's also how do you prevent the disaster, and this is something that I hadn't thought a lot about before President Clinton was mentioning this, of how do you get ahead of these things, how do you predict where the disaster would happen, how do you get people to go to people and prepare them for disaster so you can minimize the damage. And so one of the aspects that was unforeseen in this partnership is just how much we've actually learned from you, and particularly from the President, about how technology can be harnessed.
So you've talked about sharing values. You've talked about coming to the table as partners with a true sense of humility and sharing what each other of you have. And you have talked about the way in which you learn from each other and therefore you improve the efficiency on the ground. Take that forward a bit. How do we continue to build resilience in the world of today? How do we take those lessons and extrapolate them into a larger setting? What would your suggestions be?
Alex, how do you save the world?
People that are better at saving it than I. Well, again, I think that, and this is, getting ahead of these problems, figuring out where the disasters are going to be, targeting resources, human resources and tech resources against it, and then scaling this, we're going to scale this out together with the foundation to make it available for any disaster relief in America, and letting people know, get input, and just build on-the-ground partnerships that are execution-focused, where you have very similar values and very different skill sets. You can do really momentous things with really very little resources, especially money. You just need enough to actually get it off the ground.
So take it beyond America. I mean, look at the Caribbean. It's hurricane struck every year. People lose their lives, they lose their livelihoods, their homes every single year, and that's only going to get worse. How can we leverage platforms such as CGI, for example, to go beyond our borders?
Well, I think that it's an incredibly important thing that we have to address. I think one of the things that Team Rubicon has realized is that we can project American goodwill through that kind of soft power. If we can take the warriors of past generations and use them for goodwill around the world, we can do more for foreign policy than the State Department or anybody else can by virtue of service abroad. So how do we mobilize people to prevent things in the Caribbean or anywhere else in the world from happening? I think we have to leverage the resources that we see in front of us, that we have assembled in this room here. The biggest thing is action, and I know the President addressed this in his remarks before we got on stage, and the difference in what CGI is and some of the other convenings and conferences around is this commitment to action. I think too often people are content to talk about the problems and then sit on the sidelines. I think the issues that we are faced right now in this world, in this country, are too important not to act. And I think that kind of in a bottle in post-Sandy, there was no room for not acting between Palantir and Team Rubicon. It forced our hands. And I think we need to kind of evaluate all these other problems, like you mentioned with hurricane season, in the same way.
In the future, just to use your example, first of all, if we know it's going to happen, we can get a very good sense of where the damage is going to be. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of things you can do when you know the damage is going to be in one area, including educating people. Small investments can have disproportional impact. Where you target, how you target, is a human knowledge and a software problem. When the actual event happens, knowing when it's going to happen means that instead of having 800 people available, maybe you've talked to people and you have 2,000 people available. When those people deploy, they actually are being instructed on what to do, what the problems of the past were. They're updating their past information and getting better and better and better. So the net cost is lower because you've been able to figure out what's going to happen and because you've taken steps. And then the impact you can have when you bring people in is much higher because they're not recreating the wheel every time. In fact, it's almost exponential. The wheel's been created 1,000 times before they show up. And these things, again, they can save whole societies and whole cultures.
Jake and Alex, we've come to the end of our conversation here. But thank you so much, both of you. I'm sure that I speak for all of us here in thanking you for really having gone what we could call way above and beyond the call of duty. In a very real and pragmatic way, you exemplify the spirit of the Clinton Global Initiative, and we thank you for that and wish you the best as you continue to take this to other quarters of the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in welcoming back President Clinton.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to, first of all, thank my friend President Figueres. You should know that in his day job as head of the Carbon War Room, we were just together in Amsterdam at the annual meeting of the Dutch Postal Code Lottery, which gives 100% of its profits, which are half of all their proceeds, to NGOs. And we do a lot of work with them around the world, but he got almost $4 million to develop a plan to make the Caribbean island of Aruba 100% carbon neutral. And we've been doing a lot of work in the Caribbean through our foundation's climate change project. But if they can do that, then we can make the whole Caribbean carbon neutral, because it is already it has the highest electric rates in the world. So unlike America, you would need no subsidies whatever to make clean energy economically efficient today. So he's a very good man. So thank you very much for what you've done. Now, I want to ask Jake and Alex to come over. That they were a little too anodyne and modest about what they did. Let me tell you what it looked like to me when I showed up. First of all, we go out to the Rockaways, and Team Rubicon has an operations center, which is a green bus, like Army green, but also environmental green. There's an old gray-haired veteran running that about my age, which made me happy to think our group had not been totally excluded. So I go in the green bus, and it's green because it's got solar panels on the top, too, which power the computers. And this young Palantir guy shows me, he says, "You want to see what we're doing?" I said, "Yeah." So he pulls up what looks like a Google map of the Rockaways. Then all the dots appear for every damaged structure. Then a legend appears with every address. Then information appears with what's been fixed, what's being fixed, what hadn't been touched, the small number of buildings that, because they have asbestos, have to be dealt with by public health workers. Then there's the fact that there's a new park for children, which is totally under sand. Then the Team Rubicon guys, because they do this, it's like establishing a forward base in a hostile land, say, "Okay, we can keep 500 of your volunteers busy fixing these houses. Go out, meet with them. They'll dress you up right, tell you what to do. 150 people will be required for 8 hours to clean this park off." I swear to God, after 8 hours, we had 150 people there. They shoveled the last sand off the park. I couldn't make this up. So there's 350 other people. They say, "You will go these 6 places in this many numbers, and that way you'll be busy for all day." They did that. The software program that Palantir put together was developed in about 20 minutes by a 25-year-old Palantir employee who was an Egyptian American injured at Tahrir Square, demonstrating for liberty. This is the world we're moving into. And I was overwhelmed with it. And I met Alex partly because of his friendship with my great friend James Carville, who's here, or at least he was here. I've been staring at him somewhere. There he is. And James likes Alex because he wants his hair secret. But never mind all this technology stuff. Now, look, this is really serious. So I called Alex after I did. I was totally blown away. And I called and I thanked him for what his employees had done. And I realized how this information and its usability had empowered Team Rubicon, who, as he pointed out, are great at deploying forces to achieve specific objectives in difficult environments. And I asked a simple, dumb question for a guy who's technologically challenged. I said, "Well, I don't think FEMA or any state or any big city has anything like this." He said, "I don't think so. This is our proprietary software." And I said, "Well, how much would it cost to develop a tool like this that could immediately be used in any city or any state in the United States?" And he gave me a figure. And so that's what leads to this commitment, because he also said, "This is what it'll cost if I give you the labor." And basically, what this commitment is, and I can't tell you, the Team Rubicon people, they literally will go anywhere in America at the drop of a hat to help people begin the aftermath of a disaster. And usually they stay, 2 weeks? About 2 weeks. But they stayed a little longer in Sandy because the damage was a little greater. But even there, because we did not have this tool everywhere, there are houses in areas damaged by Sandy outside where Team Rubicon could be totally active, which may have to be taken down because of mold and other things. Whereas if they'd had all of this going everywhere and we'd had enough volunteers to help the Team Rubicon people do what they're doing, we could have saved them all. And so I called Alex, we talked about it. Then it's true, I called him back and I said, well, why couldn't we use this for mitigation? Like in New York, they say we got to get rid of 10,000 houses. I said, wouldn't it be good if we could number them 1 through 10,000 and figure out how many we could replace like they did in New Orleans in the project we supported, where we built back houses higher and dug down deeper and a little way. And in every case, we also lowered their power bills because we used better technology. He said, yeah, probably, but he said, let's get this other thing fixed, and then I'll think about that. But if you think about it, insured losses from natural disasters have tripled in each of the last 2 decades. We've had 144 severe weather or climate disasters since 1980, with overall damage exceeding $1 billion. 11 in 2012. But they are increasing in frequency and severity. And as a result, there's a huge interest in the insurance and reinsurance community in climate mitigation, as well as minimizing loss from rapid and effective response. So what they are committing to do is to improve the disaster response nationwide by providing a software platform and analytical support to better organize and mobilize responders all across America. Palantir, by adapting its current proprietary software, will offer a platform for collaboration and information sharing among disaster response organizations. That's a fancy way for saying the local people have to give you the factual input, and then you can deploy the resources. Palantir will integrate the data collected by NGO partners on the ground with relevant public data resources, such as census information, real-time NOAA weather, and satellite imagery. This will empower analysts and responders to leverage information so they can make better decisions regarding critical needs in the most vulnerable areas. This will expand on the recent work with Team Rubicon in the aftermath of Sandy. And Palantir will continue to work with Team Rubicon, Direct Relief, and will look to partner with other key organizations. I can tell you now that we are going to have additional partners in implementing this because we have to raise a few $1 million to make this immediately available to everybody. We'll be supported by Bloomberg Philanthropies, thank you, Mayor, and the people there, and the C40, the organization of cities which the mayor chairs and which our foundation supports. Our goal is to finish this and open source it, to make it free to FEMA, to every state, to every city in the country that needs it, and eventually then to take it to the most vulnerable cities in the world, starting probably with coastal cities and cities on or near earthquake faults, so that this can be used for everybody. This can save unbelievable numbers of lives and livelihoods if we do this right. And I just can't thank them enough And I feel so gratified that I just had a chance to see them make this work. And immediately I just thought, you know, when I was president, we had a lot of natural disasters. We got great kudos for the way FEMA handled it. We had nothing like this. And so I called Alex, and he's got one or two other things going on, as you might imagine. But he agreed to do this. I was so impressed by the way Team Rubicon used our volunteers. They were all ready to sign up. And so thank you for doing this, and I hope you'll all support this. The potential of doing this. Just think that the tool that they had in that little Army bus should not be confined to one part of what was damaged among Sandy. We should open source this, make it available to the world. Alex agreed with me. He said, I will only do this if this is free to everybody when we finish. But wherever it hits, we still have to have the data input, right? So it'll work. But the software program will there. So we're going to begin with America. I hope to spread it to other vulnerable cities throughout the world, and mostly in the coastal areas, but some in earthquake areas too. And then eventually we'd like to figure out how to use it as a mitigation tool as well. But they did an astonishing thing for some very grateful people, and I'm glad they were willing to help me to try to do it for everybody in our country and eventually beyond our borders. So let's give them a big hand. Thank you.